Harmony thought briefly of Spike's garden, of how his flowers and trees choked one limping storm front after another under a siphoned sunlight. The future was a barren graveyard that this glittering past, for all of its children and saints, could not comprehend. For the first of many desperate occasions, Harmony gladly took the numbness of her entropic body, wrapped it around her neck like a shawl, and danced a silver tongue directly in the elder's face. "No, ma'am." Her face was a concrete wall, and a smile was still drying. "We've never met before. Why do you ask?"
"Oh, it's probably just your taste in music, but I could have sworn I've seen you before. You have a shine to you, darling. Your coat is like a bright gold from yesteryear, something that this day and age rarely sees."
"Where I come from, Miss Smith, my coat doesn't have a reason to shine," Harmony said in a brief breath of honesty that she felt purified the moment. With a cheerful murmur, her teeth mimicked the sudden twinkle in Granny's eyes. "But I imagine your delightful farm here is giving it a good enough reason to as we speak."
"You got that right, child."
Harmony briefly couldn't tell what sounded more heavenly, the record player or the chuckling equine who was suddenly outshining it. She smiled all the same, a chronological prisoner to the warmth of it all. Then, the clopping hoofsteps of Big Macintosh and Applejack crossed over into the echo of the beautifully cracking strings.
"Boy, Mackie, I'm telling you, you should have seen the look on that goofy Pegasus's face when—"
She took one glance at Harmony, and in mid-laugh suffered a melting expression of her own.
"Now how in the blazes did you get here so darn quick like?"
"Yeah, one moment, if you will." Harmony waved the farm mare off and smirked back towards Granny Smith. "Have you ever listened to compositions of Mozart?"
"Ha! That old string plucker? Who hasn't, child? But she is so gorgeous darn overrated."
"Yes, but one can argue that she paved the way towards the dynamic phase of mid-third age Canterlot chamber music. Without her, we wouldn't have the celestial melodies 1 through 9.
"Oh, those old ditties? Why, those made great background music for tea ceremonies. At least before the big band phase that inundated Equestria during the Second Zebrarian conflict."
Harmony gasped wide. "I didn't know that the big band phenomenon transpired simultaneous to wartime."
"Hey!"
Applejack noisily barked in the background, flailing a cow filly hat in her hoof.
"If you live long enough to notice it, dearie, you'll find that the sweetest music is enjoyed during times of great duress."
"Don't I know it, Miss Smith?"
"Hello? Howdy?"
Applejack frowned and stood in between the Pegasus, the grandmother, and the warbling record player. She glared into the copper visitor's face.
"I do believe I was calling out to y'all." "Applejack!"
Granny Smith hissed, shaking a wrinkly lime for him.
"Be polite. I was just chewing the fat with our guest here."
Applejack did double take.
"Our guest?" "Yes, this filly by the name of...
The elder mare squinted at the Pegasus.
"I rightly apologize. What was your name again?"
"Allow me to introduce myself." Harmony smiled gently and re-curtsied. "My name is Harmony, and I am positively enraptured to meet some pony who appreciates classical music like I do, if not more so."
"She knows whose stallion Avarius is, Applejack."
Granny Smith beamed, her limbs creaking as she stood up from her rocking chair and waddled about the record player.
"I can't count how many times I've tried to get these here whippersnappers to listen to the greats."
She winked Harmony's way. "They sure don't know what they're missing." The visitor smirked back.
"Granny, this ain't no simple guest."
Applejack flung an accusatory hoof at the Pegasus while sneering.
"This here's a noisy, bothersome clerk sent here straight from the Royal Court of Canterlot."
Granny Smith suddenly gasped, holding a hoof over her heart as she regarded Harmony's cutie mark with widening eyes.
"Now it all makes a lick of sense. Why, I would recognize that celestial crest anywhere."
She smiled warmly the Pegasus's way.
"You know, it was a finely trimmed Pegasus, much like you, who came to do a census on Sweet Apple Acres several decades ago when I foaled these here seedlings Papa Appleshine. Goddess Goldfine, rest his soul, I always is entranced by just how polite and downright neighborly Princess Celestia's servants can be. That same Pegasus even came back for Appleshine's first full day.
Well, isn't that quaint? Harmony said, and was subtly gazing Applejack's way as she added, Too bad politeness isn't as rich today as it was in the Third Age. The orange mare fumed, a fountain of steam building behind her twitching ears.
Why, whatever do you mean by that, child?
Granny Smith blinked, then squinted confusedly Applejack's way.
AJ, what's going on?
Nothing, Granny, she snarled. Just a simple matter of miscommunication.
Out with it, girl.
Granny Smith stomped her hoof, bearing a wrinkled frown.
I know when the apple has fallen far from the tree, now don't I?
Before Applejack so much as opened her mouth, Harmony strolled into view and smiled placidly the elder's way. I do believe the fault is entirely my own, Miss Smith. I was clumsy and flew awkwardly into one of your family's exceptional apple trees while on a mission for the princess. One rightfully can't blame your two strong grandfoals for getting the wrong idea about me from the start. But I assure all of you, she paced about and took in 3 ponies with a smiling face, I only wish to lend a helping hoof. The princess isn't so much concerned about this applebuck season's bounty as she is the morale of the equine tilling the land that so dedicatedly provides Canterlot with such delicious apples. She smiled with the barest hint of a regal sparkle to her teeth. Applejack's frown was venomous. Mackintosh was rolling his green eyes. Granny Smith was electrified.
Well, if that ain't just divine, she cooed. Any occasion we have to treat a guest visited on behalf of the royal family is a fine day to be alive if I ever did see one. On behalf of the Apple family, I wholeheartedly welcome any assistance y'all have to give us. Besides, we did start out applebuck season early, and it would be a shame not to use an extra pair of hooves, especially if it means that the princess is smiling on the whole lot of us in approval.
But, Granny Smith, Applejack began, her orange face paling with each centimeter of the situation slipping loose from her grip. Things have been hectic enough as it is at night. At this rate, we can't afford to humor her with...
Did I or did I not just welcome her on behalf of the Apple family, Consarn it!
Smith shook a wrinkly hoof and all but trampled the obstinate mare at a bone-rattling 20 millimeters per hour.
Now go out into them there orchards and find some work for her to do. Time's a-wasting, you know. Don't make me force Big Mac into talking some sense into you.
Applejack glanced at Mackintosh. Mackintosh glanced boredly back at her, shrugging. With a heavy groan, Applejack shuffled past Harmony.
Fine. Get along, little doggies.
The last exclamation came out like a dying cat. Fantastic, Harmony hummed, trotted after the farm filly, and called back to Granny Smith. The princess will be most pleased by your limitless hospitality. Oh, and don't forget to let me hear more of your records sometime, Miss Smith. I'd love to know what your opinion is on Sebastian Buck or Prancerecki.
A pleasure I hold most dear, child.
Harmony smiled and gazed towards the many rows of orchards as the 3 strolled along.
An old copy of Stallion Avarius. Who'd have thunk it?
Her pleasant expression was swiftly smacked away by a full blonde tail swatting angrily across her face. She shook her snout and glanced aside with a wary eyebrow. Applejack hissed at her. I don't take kindly to your sneaking around the barn and persuading my own family against me. That's downright dirty-like. You can't get stuff done without getting a little dirty, Harmony winked back. Or is that not one of the traditional earth pony proverbs?
Don't you mismatch my own words on me,
the orange mare sneered.
You took advantage of a frail old pony in order to get your silly bureaucratic job done against her better wishes.
Excuse me, Miss Applejack. Harmony spoke with narrow eyes, but that frail old earth pony, if I'm not mistaken, is as much a living, breathing member of your marvelous family as you and your handsome brother here are. She obviously knows that this farm needs some extra help during the applebuck season, and if you had half the respect for her that you're so eagerly defending at the moment, then you would do well to emulate her natural gumption for generosity.
This is why I hate having to deal with you red-tape-running Canterlot clerks,
Applejack snarled.
Dang politics, one way or another y'all are always spinning the argument around to your favor. Rest assured I'm only letting you lend a hoof because Granny Smith told me to. And for the way I was raised, it's always the elders who have their way.
You have a golden conscience, Miss Applejack,
Harmony grinned. Even if it is buried beneath the rigid exterior of an obstinate mule.
Yup.
McIntosh strolled ahead of them with a sly smirk. Don't encourage her. Applejack barked at him and pointed a hoof at the infecting Pegasus. As soon as it's sundown and Granny Smith is asleep, I'm bucking her clear out of Sweet Apple Acres. You make it sound like I'm a plague. Applejack turned her nose up at the visitor. Say what your fancy's saying, but I ain't letting you out of my sights for 1 second. Heck, y'all be lucky if I allow you to buck one single tree. Pfft, under those circumstances, no pony will get any work done. All it takes is a leap of faith, Miss Applejack. Harmony then added with a mischievous smirk. Or are you chicken? Applejack stared back like a blank wall of stone. She marched icily ahead, grumbling under her breath. Y'all just follow me. Harmony chuckled proudly and trotted after her. We all intend to. Along the east side of the acres, under a glisteningly warm sun, Applejack finished nudging the last of many apple baskets beneath a tree full of bright red fruit. She took a deep breath of rich, earthy environment, smiled at the neatly arranged halos of baskets around each nearby orchard, then strolled halfway toward a dirt path cutting straight through the fields. All right, y'all listen up. She spoke without looking at the servant of Canterlot. True apple bucking takes several days, so it's important to plan out just right which field to tackle first. A month and a half ago, we had to gather a few bushels of apples early, on account of having to cater to the Ponyvillian anniversary in April and all. We took what we could from the west fields, but we spared these here trees in the east. Reason being, we wanted to give them longer time to freshen up and bask in the glow of the late spring season. And now that the time has come for total harvest, we thin out these here groves first and work our way west. That way the youngest of the fruit get all the time we reckon they need to bud up and become harvest-worthy by the time we buck 'em down. Applejack trotted around the tree and motioned towards it with a proud hoof while further delivering her speech. Now when it comes time for the bucking itself, the key is not to sweat giving it a mite bit more force than you'd imagine was necessary for a tree. The bark on these things is made out of stirring stuff, as if Princess Electra herself carved them out of the strongest iron. I bet you could trot all across Ponyville, or the entirety of Equestria for that matter, and still you wouldn't find a tree as versatile as what the apple family grows right here. So don't be afraid to kick the trees hard. If they could talk, they'd just think we were loving on 'em, that's all. Now watch and learn. Applejack snarled her teeth in a fierce grin, pivoted on her front limbs, expertly swiveled her rear legs, and catapulted her hooves murderously into the side of the tree. The entirety of the trunk shook like a gigantic wooden tuning fork, and, in a magical exploit of gravity, every single apple from the branches fell expertly into the soft wicker baskets waiting for them below. Applejack let loose a satisfied sigh, dusted her hooves off, and trotted proudly around the containers now brimming with red fruit. The key is to make the orchard shake so much that the stems plumb give up holding the apples in the air, she said. Mother Nature does the rest. It takes a lot of effort and practice to get just right aim and kicking pose down pat, but the most important thing is to put your back into it and firm with the tree. Think of it like you're chastising the thing for making a mess on the porch. She blushed and rubbed her head underneath her brown hat. I reckon that sounds a bit silly. But when you've lived your whole life around these here trees, you almost start treating your crops like part of your family, especially figuring that they've been around for more generations than most Ponyvillian citizens can count. She cleared her throat and glanced aside at the red stallion who was setting up the last of the many baskets around the tree. Mac, care to give it another go yourself? Big Mac smirked at her, winked, and spun with a mighty arc of massive legs. A thunderous clap filled the east end of the acres, and the apples literally hovered above the branches, spinning, before falling like plummeting red and green gyroscopes into their wicker containers below. McIntosh twisted the haystack in his mouth and proudly bowed with a gesture towards the expertly filled baskets. Applejack whistled. That's my big brother, all right, always making me look bad. Heaven help Apple Bloom when she gets to bucking age. She may just give up and resort to pie baking like her grandma. She turned and faced the visitor again. But you saw how Big McIntosh didn't hesitate none when he took a swing at that tree, right? We ain't dealing with stalks of celery here. Apple buck season is like endless iron pony competition. You gotta give it your all, though and through. So then, are y'all still bent on getting your hooves duty, or what? There was no response. Applejack squinted and tilted the brim of her hat up to get a better look.
Harmony was basking in the warm sunlight, smiling drunkenly as she marveled at the feel of green earth beneath her squirming hooves.
Epona alive. I forgot just how springy grass felt.
Oh. She raised her hoof as several darting green insects waltzed across her limb.
Aphids. I found aphids. Would you imagine that?
She glanced at the two blanching farm ponies, blushed, then cleared her throat.
Yes, apple bucking. It's just like loving on a tree. Really hard?
Big Mac murmured something into Applejack's ear. The orange mare nodded numbly and gave the Pegasus a cockeyed look.
Why do we get the feeling that y'all burn more than just mana torches over at Canterlot Court? I'm very sorry for being distracted. It's been, a long week of flying around to random farms and being given the third degree by obstinate horses wearing hats.
Hardy har! Applejack rolled her eyes and back-trotted with a hoof pointed at an apple tree surrounded by empty baskets.
Step up to the plate, Sugar Cube. You've talked your way this far. Reckon we should see if your hooves can dance as well as you sing. Pfft, why not?
Harmony walked up and stared at the looming tree before her.
I mean, how hard can it be?
Mac and Applejack exchanged amused smirks.
Well, Celestia forbid that one of her ever respectful, ever dainty royal clerks should get her limbs dirty.
The farm mare snickered.
I bet you all think that kicking apples out of trees is just as easy as writing letters and setting up appointments. You really don't think Princess Celestia would have sent me to get a good idea of how you run this farm without expecting me to go all the way, do you? I may not be a charming country pony that you expected to gab with today, but I'd be lying if I said I actually wanted to see you get hurt.
Applejack stretched out a hoof cautiously. Just tap it a bit, why don't you?
But I thought you said that true apple bucking required being forceful with the tree.
I'd rather you not break anything, Sugar Cube, Applejack smirked, especially if you expect to return to Canterlot in one piece. Those are some pretty fragile-looking wings you're sporting there, after all. Big Mac snickered behind her, and Applejack snorted to avoid breaking into giggles herself. Harmony rolled her eyes, spun her flank towards the tree, and raised her hooves.
Right, just a tap.
With a girlish grunt, she slapped one leg against the tree. Suddenly, her ears popped, as if she was piercing the gray overcast of the wastelands in the Harmony. She blinked in sudden dizziness and let her gaze fall to the earth, spotting several apples rolling dirtily through the grass.
Whoops, dang it.
She blushed under her copper skin and gazed up at the two farm ponies.
I'm sorry, it looks like I totally missed the baskets.
Harmony stopped in mid-speech, squinting curiously at the two siblings. They were gazing up at Harmony's black mane with wide eyes and open jaws. Mac's haystock fell loose from his lips.
What?
Harmony blinked up at the tree, and jumped back at the sight that it was leaning 45 degrees off its foundation and away from her.
Ah!
She winced as the hulking trunk literally fell over with a thud, its exposed roots dangling nakedly in the air as the shaking ground loosened even more apples from rattling baskets surrounding the gruesome catastrophe. She bit her lip, sweat dropping as she gazed back and forth from the tumbled tree to the gawking farm ponies. Mac's eyes were still wide. Meanwhile, his sister swung her hat off, clenched her green eyes shut, and slapped her skull with the right hoof a few times before shaking her entire snout and glancing once more at the sight with a twitching expression. Slowly, the two swiveled their necks until they were gazing mutely at Harmony, with a blank plea for an explanation. The time traveler was no less confused.
Guess that was a weak one? My bad.
She glanced left, right, behind her.
Oh, here we go.
She marched over towards another tree she spotted, aimed her hindquarters at it.
Ahem. Maybe if I just aim a bit higher.
She bucked it, once more with a tap. It exploded. With a sound that mimicked several fireworks rocketing skyward, 24 apples simultaneously lifted off the tossed branches of the kick tree and soared clear across the east orchards, landing in a chicken coop behind the barn. This ended with several thunderous claps, followed by a chorus of blood-curdling clucks that filled the otherwise tranquil air. Harmony bit her lip and glanced across the horizons of her mind. She briefly remembered something Spike had told her about the durability of her projected self, that while her time-displaced soul was wearing this avatar of the goddess of time, complete with a coat and mane painted in the image of Princess Atropa, she would be impervious to hunger, exhaustion, and thirst. It suddenly occurred to the crafty survivalist inside that numb shell of a body that another benefit to her chronological displacement was an unearthly strength that was variably related to her imperviousness.
So, yeah.
Harmony wasted no more mute seconds and hopped across on all fours. A bright smile plastered desperately across her face. Apple bucking! Maybe I should just, do it the dainty Canterlottian way. She smiled sheepishly and marched off towards the next tree. I'll, buck in the direction opposite of the chicken coop from now on. Applejack gulped and slapped her hat back onto her mane. Mac, do your sister a favor. Next time I'm lucky to be invited to the Grand Galloping Gala, remind me to look into a Canterlottian gymnasium. Yup.